Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the COASTER-net Dispatch. We are here to follow up our discussion from the other evening about the merger between Six Flags and Cedar Fair. After doing the show with Danny, I kind of sat there and thought about some more, got into some arguments with people online about different stuff. So we're not going to rehash a lot of that stuff, but the one aspect I don't think we really covered too much on that show was the aspect of what to do with all the IPs, because it's not just Six Flags that has IPs. Cedar Fair has their own set of IPs with Snoopy. And we know from history that this isn't the first time this has happened. That Cedar Fair went through a big merger, a big purchase, actually, of the old Paramount Parks back in, what was that, 2008, 2006, somewhere back then, right?
And they actually had to do this with Geauga Lake as well. They kind of have the same problem.
True. And so like this isn't their first rodeo. So it's interesting. So now we know that Cedar Fair is kind of in the catbird seat with management, at least, is from all intents and purposes what we believe. So we think that their guiding philosophies might move forward into this park. So like what are your thoughts? So let's first talk about what they did with Paramount, right?
Yeah,
And
sure. So let's go backwards. So when you're talking about IPs, you're really talking about like third party IPs because like they
yes,
have their own IPs that they've created. But when
yes.
they inherited the Paramount Parks, and also I'm going to throw Geauga Lake in there too, just because I know that's a band-aid for a lot of people. So we're going to rip that off too. And and anyway, when they came in, they had a timeline, I think, with Paramount. I think they had
Yes.
a season, but with Six Flags, they had to get that shit out right
Well,
away.
Paramount, I believe, I know, I think it's the opposite with Paramount. I believe they had 10 years with Paramount.
Oh,
And
okay.
and then they
They just
decided after a
it just
couple
went
of
fast.
seasons
Yeah.
to just get rid of it. They're saying, well, we have no intention of following up on this. Now, keep in mind, like Paramount, so like they had like the Tomb Raider rides in King's Dominion, Kings
Right.
Island. What else? They had the Italian Job for the stunt coaster that they have now. What else did they have in there? I forget.
They had well, Flight of Fear was the Twilight Zone,
Yes.
right? And oh geez, they had didn't they have Star Trek too? Aren't
No,
you Trekkie?
I don't think they Cedar. Well, it's interesting that you say that because Cedar Fair actually had Star Trek in a separate deal, where Cedar Fair for a very small amount of time actually ran the Star Trek Las Vegas experience.
Okay.
Um, that
But
was part of their.
wasn't one of those Vekoma Flying Dutchmans like a
Okay,
it was
now
it was it
now
was sorry, it was something sci-fi though.
yeah, now I gotta go. Was it always Firehawk? Well, Flight Deck was Top Gun. That because
Oh yeah, that's true. Top Gun everywhere.
well, because it's funny because even after, because I never went to Paramount Parks under that system. But when I would go and they already had changed the Arrow inverted coaster at Kings Island to Flight Deck, um the guys on the spiel would just keep doing Top Gun quotes and Top Gun references like the entire time. It was actually really funny, like
That's
saying stuff like, "Oh,
I don't mind when ride ops have fun like that
no,"
though.
we would say stuff like, "And we'll see you in 3 minutes, and hopefully this ride just takes your breath away," like stuff like that, like just off the wall. But yeah, so they had, but so like the Paramount stuff, I never felt was like an overwhelming amazing thing in that park. Like it was always like permeated everything, but they never had really great categories. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
Top Gun
I
is a
think what
classic
set
movie.
yeah, Top Gun might be the outlier there because it's so beloved, but
And
like
like
the
Tomb
difference
Raider was so
between
entwined with the story of those rides that it's hard to think of it
yeah,
any other way.
yeah. But I
And
think the
I
problem
rode I
between
rode the Crypt and I liked it. I thought it was still an amazing ride. The indoor version. I'm gonna go see if Firehawk had a different name. I don't think it did though.
I feel like the problem with the Paramount ones, like
Oh,
going away from those movies, is that they didn't have good sequels and stuff.
yeah.
Like you look at like what Universal has, they really, and Disney, they kind of like lean on those sequels. So like once they were kind of like moving away from those, and the public's interest in those IPs, it didn't make sense for Cedar Fair to really hold on to them.
No, and
So I
I
think
think
that was
Cedar
an easy thing.
Fair, yeah, like Cedar Fair saw the writing on the wall and was like, you know what, we're not going to hold on. We're not in 10 years, we're not going to pay for this anyway, or however many years is 5 or 10. I forget the number. But I know they cut the deal loose earlier than what they wanted to, or what they could have done. But then they just turned everything into oh my god, that's another one. I just looked it up. Face Off was the inverted boomerang.
Oh God, yeah,
Like who? What? These are terrible movies to make roller coasters after. Like I get it, you're facing each other and it makes sense, but it's a terrible idea to do that. I
it
just
just it just feels like they took whatever was the summer movie that year
yeah,
and made it work. Yeah, it
like
just
it just
didn't.
like so like these IPs weren't that important, but then you could argue that maybe the names that they gave these coasters after they pulled out might have been even worse. Because people like to complain about the Batman clones and all that other stuff. But when they started changing things to like flight deck, and we had a number of different flight decks all around, the flight deck out at Kaga, the flight deck at Kings Island. Um, Flight of Fear was okay, I guess, for a name for a coaster. I still doesn't. What's Flight of Fear? That just still doesn't make any sense. Um,
Yeah, the
what
Backlot stunt show, like
yeah, like this, like yeah, that was a strange one. The Crypt was, I think, maybe one of their better changes, but Cedar Fair did take a lot of flack for that.
yeah,
So let's fast forward now to
yeah.
this new situation.
It kind of feels like bootleg versions of what they had going on a little bit. Yeah,
Right? So it's like Flight Deck is like the bootleg version. Like they have like aircraft carrier themes, and instead of calling it Top Gun, everything just felt weird. And then it wasn't. Kings Island had a really weird vibe to it for a while, up until they started doing all their own things, like when they put in Diamondback and Banshee and Mystic Timbers, where finally it kind of like regained some sense of like normalcy. And then they changed Flight Deck to the Bat. So they fixed a lot of that over the years. You can still find a few flight decks out there. So, but and then Jaga Lake, they had the same problem, but that problem was almost solved. Like they just moved all the coasters out. So, and that's where you thought Firehawk was called X Flight, but that
okay.
was back at Jaga Lake. So that's where you thought Firehawk did have a previous name. So with Jaga Lake, so they just changed everything, right?
Yeah, like Looney Tunes had to go, DC had to go, all that had to go like instantly.
So yeah, so now we're at that position of looking at what they could do today. I see there's like three, I think there's three clear options, and I'm completely unsure of which way they're going to go. I think it's a 33 split on all three of these options. I think option one is they ditch all the IPs altogether and say we're not paying for DC, we're not paying for WB. And they'll do the same thing they did with the Paramount parks. All the Batmans will become flight decks. I don't know. All the Supermans will become
Vigilante Hero.
well,
Vigilante Hero Black, the inverted coaster.
or maybe the Outlaw. I don't know, like, or the Vigilante. Just call it Vigilante. Or they could just go with Flight Deck. Or as I joked around in our Patreon group chat. Why everyone's like, oh, they're going to start renaming all the Cedar Fair coasters into Batman. I said, hold on, why aren't we naming all the Batman's Raptor all of a sudden? Like, just have a dozen Raptors out there just to irritate Danny Miller, Paint them all green and green, just like this beautiful color scheme right there.
See, I was talking to our friend Brian, and we had the same thing going, except I had the idea that Batman and Robin the Chiller can come back in Gemini.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, red
There
and
you go.
blue, breathe new life into the Gemini,
Right?
Batman and Robin.
It's already very similar colors. You don't have to go very far there.
Oh,
So like you could do like generic overlays on everything. I do think there is a possibility in any of these that Snoopy gets integrated into some of the Six Flags areas that there's a lot of I know Great America is one of the Six Flags parks I'm most familiar with. And they don't have a Looney Tunes area. So like they
really?
they don't. They used to way back in the day. And
Yeah,
then
I didn't notice that when we were there.
and then when we were there with you, they had like Flintstones and Jetsons and that
Well, it's
group over by Goliath. That was that. And then in the back by American Eagle, that little kid area, that was the Wiggles originally, and now it's just like a generic like kids area with no real like overarching IP onto it. So you could easily overlay, and I've always wondered why they didn't put Looney Tunes on any of that stuff, but they never did. Um, and you could easily make Camp Snoopy's out of some of that stuff, which would be, I think, exactly what Cedar Fair would do anyway. So
yeah.
I think the Camp Snoopy's might just happen no matter what one of these options we choose. But then I don't feel like do you think they're just going to put generic names on all these rides at Six Flags?
I don't know. I mean, they specifically said in their press release that they were retaining all IPs and that they would be combined together. So, like, I didn't know how to take that, but I kind of assume that the change that we're going to get, if there is going to be a change, is going to happen slowly.
I think you're right. So I think what we're going to see happen is either because they also still retained all the Paramount stuff IPs. So so like them saying that in the press release, they could say that today and then completely change their mind in 2 years and say, okay, we have no intention of paying for this. And I have no idea how
Yeah,
much Six
I mean,
Flags was
they
paying.
could they can turn around and be like, "Oh, we meant the Armatron displays for the ride times and the
Yeah,
Coca-Cola booths. We didn't mean DC and peanuts."
exactly. And like I just feel like there's a huge undertaking where Six Flags has really gone all in on the DC theming, almost to the point of silliness. I think a lot of times I do agree with that somewhat. Is every single ride now is like a DC character or something, which is, I guess, cool on some respects. But to change all of that, even slowly, is gonna take a whole lot of work. And I guess
Yeah,
I had a whole list here earlier. I guess all like your pendulum rides could just become like deliriums or max airs, all your
or they can bring the Vortex name over to Six Flags
start calling things
and all
vortex.
those yeah, they can all be Vortex.
All your single rails can just be rail blazers since they're the same anyway. And things that are not DC themed, like Jersey
Except
Devil,
for one.
obviously.
Except for one. One has to be Goliath.
One does have to be Goliath. We have to expand that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like Six Flags is so synonymous with DC at this point that changing all of that's going to be really hard to do. The second option is
They've also cleaned up some of those areas recently, like Georgia, Texas, the in New Jersey they kind of moved stuff around. So like those are fresh
yeah,
areas in some
like
parts.
seriously, and like Fiesta Texas has really gone all in on the theming and stuff, and really has done a really good job.
Yeah,
Um, and everyone says the what?
they've done a lot of like ride rehabs and just kind of cleaning up. Yeah.
And like I guess you could like if you have like Poltergeist at Fiesta and you have Joker's Jinx over at Six Flags America, you could just call that Poltergeist too. Like you could reuse some of the names already that you have in your chain. And I don't think anyone would really care all that much. But I just feel like the other option is, and this is the one I really want to talk about. Well,
Sure.
the second option is I'll go with the second option first, is where you kind of like do a mix that you let the Six Flags parks have their DC themes, and then you don't integrate anything into the Cedar Fair parks, that you kind of just keep them separate, just as they are. And you could really do that for as long as you wanted to. I don't know how the deal itself is structured, if the deal is structured for the chain or if the deal is structured per park. I knew for the longest time, like Six Flags Montreal did not have a DC themed except for the Flash Pass was called the Flash Pass still, which was
Yeah.
weird.
Well, it might have been a separate license for a ride and for an amenity.
Yeah, so like there's a whole lot of legalese stuff that goes into
Yeah.
these. I like what parks can get them, what parks can use them, how do you use them. We talked about that when we talked about the Great Adventure Coaster and um how it has to be a certain way that you say the name and write the name on the ride name. That's why we get these weird like, Riddler Revenge instead of the Riddler's Revenge. Like it's just a weird dynamic with this IP. So like that's the second option. And I don't know if that's actually, I guess it could happen that you leave the Six Flags parks and you leave the Cedar Fair parks and you just run them separate with the two IPs, because depending on how the contract is, maybe you can't expand them.
Yeah.
But
Except for the Flash Pass, bring that around.
well,
Get that on
right.
the app.
But the one thing I will say is I think there is an opportunity here. And people are like, "Oh, DC, oh, why we don't want that in the Cedar Fair parks." And I'm going to caution you right away, because there are a number of parks all around the world right now that are getting rave reviews. Like I look at like Disney, and I know it's Disney, but I look at Galaxy Edge and people freaking out on social media about the Mandalorian entering into Galaxy's Edge, like just losing their minds over this.
Yeah, it's just a character actor too.
It's just a character actor walking around that they talk to people. Okay. And the other thing, just recently they have added Ahsoka to Galaxy's Edge. And there's 45-minute lines to meet Mickey Mouse at Disney parks. And okay, so let's move away from Disney. I think Busch Gardens and SeaWorld does an amazing job with Sesame Street right now. That every time we go to those parks, because now that I have the two kids, it's a completely different experience. They have Sesame Street parades. They have meet and greets with Elmo and Cookie Monster. And my kids lose their minds over that stuff. That Robert, I got video upon video of him running up to characters and giving them huge hugs. And granted, he does that at Cedar Fair with like the Snoopy characters. But I think it's almost criminal that Six Flags does not have an area that you can meet Batman every single day. That is a missed opportunity to me. You can't meet Batman. You can't meet Superman. Like, I know you got to pay actors for this stuff, and like Superman and Wonder Woman, they have to kind of look like the characters. But at the end of the day, Batman can be Batman. You just got to buy the suit. You can put anybody in the suit. You can put me in the suit. I'm a little bit overweight, but you know what? I can be old Batman. I can be Michael Keaton Batman. So
they do. I personally have met Marvin the Martian,
what?
Tweety Bird, and Sylvester. I mean, I'm assuming they were the real
in the
ones.
last 20 years?
Yeah.
What? Because like at Great America,
actually, at Great America, I have a selfie of myself with Tweety Bird.
Oh, they do bring them out in the morning sometimes in front of. And now that you say that, but like they're not like there routinely. Like it's like in the DC characters, they'll roll them out for like media days all of a sudden. Like when we were there for like the Justice League media day, they had the whole Justice League there. When we were there for Joker media day, he did the whole opening, which was cool.
Actually, they have Joker at New England walking around sometimes too.
Dude, like I just feel like that number one that needs to be expanded upon.
Yeah,
but then I'm also thinking
haphazard.
It's haphazard. It's just not like it's there's no like set times. There's no like even with SeaWorld and the characters, there's a specific room that you can go meet the characters in. There's a huge store connected to it. You can buy the photos. You can do all this other stuff. I just think it's criminal that there's not Batman there every single hour on the hour in the park somewhere. Like it seems like a no-brainer to me if you want to upcharge people. Maybe they're going for a different market, like a teenager market.
These are the IPs for the thrill rides. For the kid rides, it's Looney Tunes.
Well, and true, and like you could have them walking around, but even like high school kids want to take pictures with Batman usually. Like maybe. I can't tell. Like we went on like a competitive drama thing, and all my kids, like we were doing like a Disney princess play, and like high school kids were like going up and taking pictures with my kids going to like the different schools. Like they want to be taking pictures with people in good costumes. So like
Sure.
that's not just like a little kid thing. That's an ever, especially with social media now, you know. But I want to take it a step further. Why
Okay.
not? And I know this isn't Cedar Fair. I know it's not Cedar Fair to do in-depth theming, right? But you have an amazing IP in DC. You have the Looney Tune stuff, which is cool for kids areas. And you have Snoopy or whatever too. But with this DC stuff, why not look at different areas in the parks that when you're trying to update them and stuff like jump to my mind, like King's Dominion, they got this whole jungle area that they haven't really like fleshed out what they're doing back there. Why not make it into like Gotham City and make it like a really in-depth immersive experience into Gotham City? And I'm not saying you have to do it there. I'm not saying you have to do it but like, why not really capitalize on your IP? It seems to work for Disney. People are losing their minds over Avengers Campus at California's Adventure, and that's not even that impressive from everything I've heard. And people
Yeah.
are still lining up to get there. People are lining up to get into Galaxy's Edge. That's just a bunch of rock work. Like, why not
Yeah.
do an immersive experience?
We might, I mean, we have seen Cedar Fair go all in renovating areas before.
Yeah.
Like Carowinds just did the aeronautical landing with
Uh
the
huh.
for tribute to flight. They redid that area for Copperhead Strike. We saw King's Dominion do Candy Apple Grove. Um, like when they do a big investment, they make it spread out and hit the whole area. Maybe we'll see them, take a big jump and say, hey, we're going to redo this whole area. Let's make room for Gotham City, or let's make room for something like that.
And like
Uh,
even renovating the Six Flags parks, like I thought the best one that they had was Six Flags Over Georgia when you drop down by Riddler and Batman. Like that was like the most, and it wasn't even that good, but it felt the most
that's
cohesive.
fresh too, though. They did that like 2 years ago, right?
Well, no, I'm talking about way back when. Like they used to
Oh,
have a
okay.
Batman stunt show there. They had, and they've changed stuff every now and then. But like just like the architecture of the area felt like they tried at least to do
Well,
something.
you just said the stunt show. I mean, I know that they did that at a lot of the parks, but
Yeah.
that might be an easy way to try it out. Something that's kind of like you got to invest in a show anyway, or a parade, or a haunt. I know that's something that you brought up on the last show. Lean on the IPs for that because it seems like a special event and see if people get engaged with it.
Oh, well, speaking of the haunt,
I
one of
mean,
the coolest things I've ever done was at Magic Mountain. They actually had a Suicide Squad like scare zone. And what
okay.
it turned into was like a Suicide Squad parade. And then they had like the characters walking around as scare actors, and then you could take pictures with Harley Quinn. It was actually, I'm like, oh, this is actually how I envision this to be. I was always shocked they never did an Arkham Asylum haunt because I just thought it was a natural thing to do, and they just never did it. Um, but like that was really cool. I just want them to lean more into the IP where Six Flags would create a ride and have a bunch of areas and call it like superhero this or Gotham City that, and it was just a name of a place on a map. It never felt like real Gotham City. And when you look at stuff like the movie world Australia, they actually really lean into the DC theme out there, where they have parades, they have their characters always promoting stuff. They have areas in the park that, from what I can tell, actually look kind of like Gotham City a little bit. Like that's why not go all in on this? That you have this IP, people love Batman, people love DC stuff. We see it doing well with Marvel in Disney. We see it doing well with Marvel and Universal. We see Star Wars doing well in Disney land in Disney in Magic Kingdom or Hollywood Studios, excuse me. Like people losing their minds, and I don't know how much money it's generating, but I'm sure it's generating enough to justify doing that kind of stuff. Except if you're trying to build the DC themed hotel, I could see that failing. Um, but it's just like lean into it more and let's really explore this IP and what you can do with it. Just having a few signs up on a midway, I don't think is enough. And like having cardboard signs about DC characters as you walk to go ride Superman, the ride or something, like it's not enough. I want more. And if you really want to, you have an IP that you can really exploit. And Cedar Fair's never really had that. Like the Snoopy stuff, they've done a great job with it, with Camp Snoopy, with Planet Snoopy. They've done a really great job with Snoopy and having characters out and really pouring money into it. And now that they have this access to the DC stuff, I'm not saying we retheme Magnum and Raptor and Gemini to new stuff. I'm saying if you've already knocked shit down, why not look at
Sure.
maybe putting something up that is a DC themed area and kind of
Yeah.
fits with what you want to do?
Well, I mean, I know you and Danny already covered like the competition and lack of competition between the two chains in the first place. But if you look at the places where they're close to actual competition, so like Six Flags Fiesta Texas seems to be a notch above the rest of the chain. They are right next to SeaWorld.
Yeah.
Knott's Berry Farm is right next to Disney. You
Yeah.
know, like where you are actually near the competition, it does kind of bring that out. You know, I don't know if King's Dominion is keeping up with Busch Gardens, quite as much as they could be, but
Yeah.
maybe there'll be a little bit more of a drive to do that. And if they see that working in those parks, it could trickle down to the other ones. You never know. We do see that like the best idea is the last idea kind of thing in a lot of cases here.
Well, it's just like it just seems like a no-brainer to me that you can market it more, you can sell stuff. That Six Flags does a lot of Batman t-shirts, does a lot of Superman t-shirts, and now you have a natural extension of that. You just keep selling that stuff, and you could put it into other places that are kind of floundering. I look at places like Michigan's Adventure that really has a beautiful Camp Snoopy. They just built that. It's a beautiful, beautiful addition to the park. But the rest of the park has no real like flavor to it. Has no real like personality. It's just there. King's Dominion, that I know that Jungle Expedition, everyone likes that, but maybe you can overlay something else out there and put some stuff out there. There's the thing is that the Cedar Fair parks are so well built up at this point that is there really areas that you can change? I think every park has like probably a stretch that you can change to really add something to it. But I just think there's an opportunity here for people are like, oh, DC this, and I know it's become there's a Batman clone here, a Superman clone there. I know it's become cliche, but I think people are missing maybe what this IP could be and what the possibilities are at the end of the day. And I'm kind of excited to see. I'm hoping that they keep it. I'm hoping we don't get Six Flags that are completely generic, and go back to like generic names because
Well, what about the IP that they've generated? Like that is something that Cedar Fair at least tries to do. They try to like generate their own IP and generate their own storylines. And I feel like once the marketing is over for those new rides, that all just drops off. But it doesn't with like Batman and Superman. It kind of like
no,
because
because
it's
like
got a bigger world to it.
like for example, Steel Vengeance, they created Blackjack and
Yeah.
Chess and Digger, and like they had them out for a few days or a few, like maybe even that whole season, that whole first season they were walking around, but now they're gone, and they tried to create that whole storyline between Maverick and Steel Vengeance and trying to add in other stuff, and that was really cool. And then they tried to continue it with Forbidden Frontier, and that flopped on its face. Forbidden Frontier, though, um, some of the characters were out there because they had the costumes, so they threw some of them out there. But it just didn't hit the right notes. I think Forbidden Frontier was too dramatic and too theatrical for the people going to Cedar Point, and it took way too long to get through it. I
Yeah.
remember me, Dason, and Rob Dole went back there during Coaster Mania one year, and we did it. And then we were back there for like 35, 40 minutes and only got like one or two things done. And I'm like, things went way too slow too, I think, which is which is part of that problem. But now the other problem is that the IP wasn't recognizable. That if you don't know the story of Steel Vengeance and you don't really follow it, but you can come into the park and you know the story of Batman already, you know.
Right. If
So
you're not a Fuzi, you didn't follow that marketing campaign. You don't even know that these characters exist. Like you're
exactly,
learning them right then and there if you
yeah.
care.
And it doesn't resonate, but you know Batman already. There's not a person in the world that doesn't know who Superman is. You might not know the whole story, but you just need to know the costume and know who he is. And that's what
Yeah.
you're going to resonate with. And there's an opportunity. I really think there's an opportunity here that people are missing of really doing an immersive IP, something that Cedar Fair has never really had. Like they've had a little stuff. They've had Snoopy, but Snoopy was never going to become, people aren't buying tickets to go see Snoopy. You know, that's not going to happen. But it could happen that people buy tickets to go see an amazing Batman's Gotham City. Like if you made a truly, if you made an 89 Batman like street in one of the parks, people would lose their damn minds. People went to go see the
Well, I mean,
Flash movie just to see Michael Keaton. Like,
the easy thing to do would be to plunk Battle of Metropolis down and then rehab the area around that and really
yeah,
show people like, hey, we've got an anchor ride. We're creating an area. We've got room to expand and maybe they just start repainting some stuff that's nearby, renaming it, and then you got it. You know, like you got what you're talking about,
yeah,
and let them kind of show like, hey, we could do this differently. We took this thing and did it differently. Um, and maybe in some of those Six Flags parks, like at Great America, you've got a Western area. Maybe they should do something that creates their own story
yeah.
there and see how people in that zone like it. See if giving them something different works.
Yeah, so like I think at the end of the day, I know a lot of people like to it's I've seen a dozen of them already, people repainting rides and renaming rides and I've seen it all. But I do think that if people start really thinking, but Six Flags did everything on the cheap. I get that. That everything that they plopped in the ride, they put Superman on it, they painted it red, yellow, and blue, and called it a day and walked away. But I think if you really want to capitalize on the thing that you're paying for, the success is already there. You see what Marvel is at Universal. You see what Marvel is at Adventures Campus. You see what Star Wars is for Disney. You see what all these IPs do and people lining up to meet characters and losing their minds. And I think there's an opportunity here for the same. So hopefully Cedar Fair does that because I'm going to be a happy camper. I'd love to walk into a park and see a truly immersive DC experience, and be
And
able to take a picture with Batman.
I love Star Wars. Like I was really excited to go check that out, but there's not a lot back there. Like it looks phenomenal,
Yeah.
but there really is not a lot back there.
No.
But it's drawing people there just for that.
Yeah.
There's two rides and a bunch of upcharge kind of like things and
Yeah.
someplace to eat, and that's really about it.
And you could easily do that. You could easily do something like that. And like I said, it's a bunch of rock work, is what it is. It's just,
Yeah, yeah.
and
They
Cedar
didn't even
Fair
have
is
to put
usually good
signs.
at rock work. Like that's
Yeah,
like their wheelhouse.
they didn't have to even put signs up like a theme park normally would because that would have destroyed the theming.
Oh my God. I just thought of something like Cedar Point on Millennium Island. Like there's those heavy rumors that they're gonna have that whole Zamperla flat ride package out there. Why not do a DC theme out there? Oh my God, people lose their minds. But if you did I want something immersive. I just don't want names on rides. Like if that's what you're gonna do, then keep it out. I'm fully in agreement with it. Just keep it out. But if you're gonna do something really special and do something immersive, then do that. And I think that would be really cool. I think I really
you
think that's
know,
the way to go.
I never even considered the fact that maybe they would phase it like across the board. I just always assumed that it would start to leak in because even if they lose a park, who cares? That's the next guy's problem. They don't
No,
have to deal with
truly,
that
like
again.
that's the thing. I wonder how it's gonna, but what's gonna happen. But like, yeah, I'm kind of excited to see. I hope they don't just ditch it because if they ditch it, it's gonna make the Six Flags parks really bad. Like there's no Like, I'm not excited about that option. So,
they'd have to do a lot of retheming and a
oh my
lot of
God.
infrastructure work, and we know that that's not their strong suit.
No, no, it's going to be a lot of reprinting of the same ride signs so, well, just a thought experiment I had there, and I something that I needed to talk about. So, as always, thank you for joining us here on the COASTER-net Dispatch. Hopefully, you enjoyed our little retrospective of IPs across the board, and what might come here with this grand merger of Cedar Fair and Six Flags that we're still celebrating, even days after. We're the only YouTube channel celebrating this great merger, I believe, based on the comments. So as always, I am Andrew Barchuk from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Jeff Goodman from Long Island, New York.
Right on, Right Warriors.
Good night.